Hello everyone, and welcome to a bit of a different video from me. I'll be showing off some maps of Middle-earth and showing how Middle-earth and the rest of Arda changed between the ages, and how Tolkien's vision of Middle-earth also changed. There's no real point to this video other than a bit of visual fun, but I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. So everyone who is familiar with Middle-earth has probably seen this map, the Westlands of Middle-earth in all of their Third Age glory, which is to say, not really much glory at all. With the exception of Umbar, which is a little bit further to the south, these are pretty much the only lands that matter in the Third Age. Apart from vague descriptions, everything outside of these borders is grey space. Or is it? So we actually have an idea of what the rest of the world, named Arda, actually looks like. If you've searched it up on Google, you've probably seen some of these maps. The one on screen right now is a Lindafirion map, a Finnish role-playing game. And these two maps, which are appearing now, are maps made for MERP, or Middle-earth Role-Playing Game. Nice maps, but fan-made and non-canon. As such, none of the locations on these maps are real. So unfortunately, the mystical land of, well, I really hate saying it, but Jojojojo and the dominions of Wow, I don't know how to pronounce that. Anyway, they aren't real. In actuality, here is our map of the world, which I might add is flat. Looks kind of strange, doesn't it? Well, it was sketched by the professor himself sometime in the early 1930s. This is supposed to be a map of Arda following the fall of the lamps, and even well before the elves first awoke. We have Valinor in the west and the empty lands of the sun in the east. We also have familiar places such as the Blue Mountains, the Iron Mountains, and Valeriand, as well as strange places like the Mountains of Wind, the Yellow Mountains, and a southern chain of the Grey Mountains, none of which appear in Tolkien's main writings. Unsurprisingly, you're probably looking at this and thinking, well, this looks nothing like Middle-earth, and yeah, it doesn't, because it isn't really, because Tolkien's vision changed. This is Tolkien's next sketch. Instead of a long, rectangular continent, we get a Middle-earth which actually looks somewhat similar to Europe, Asia, and Africa. Valinor and the Lands of the Sun are the same, but we get the addition of a new continent known as the Darklands, of which we also know nothing about. This is basically the modern-ish version of Arda, at least when it comes to the general shape. There's still things that are missing though, as this was drawn before Tolkien had conceptualized certain things. You can see that Beleriand is pretty filled out, with Hithlum, Dorthonion, and the River Sirion definitely existing. But outside, there's a lot missing. Almost the entirety of the Westlands that we're familiar with from Lord of the Rings is entirely missing, including the Misty Mountains. But we can find a more detailed map that is probably the most accurate thing we have. This is a map of the First Age from Atlas of Middle-earth by Karen Wynne Fonstad. An excellent book. With this, we can see Eriador, we can see the Misty Mountains, Greenwood, the River Anduin. We can also see the approximate location of Oricani, the Red Mountains, the place where the other four Dwarven Fathers presumably awoke. Notably, Mordor is underwater, and the coasts of Middle-earth extend much further west than what we are used to seeing. A few things I want to make note of. You can see Beleriand compared in size to Eriador, and you can see that they're very similar in size. A lot of people have this idea of Beleriand being huge, and that simply isn't true. All of our major events of the First Age actually take place in a relatively small area, at least compared to the rest of Middle-earth. In saying that, these maps might not be entirely accurate either. I really want to stress the word might. We know now from the Peoples of Middle-earth, the current last book in the History of Middle-earth series, that Tolkien conceptualized the Sea of Rune being a thing during the Ardain's migration to the west. Looking at the map, you'll notice it doesn't exist. Instead, the massive Sea of Helcar is still a thing. So where's the Sea of Rune? Well, the Sea of Helcar might have drained before men awoke, and by the time the Ardain went west, the Sea of Rune was just one of the remnants of the Sea of Helcar. Likewise, they might have always been separate seas, which means the map we're looking at on screen mustn't be completely accurate. Just a neat little thing to think about. Moving on, we now have Karen Wynne Fonstad's map of the Second Age. Beleriand is gone, as is much of the coastline of Middle-earth, all gone as a result of the destruction from the War of Wrath. Not all of Beleriand, however. The Hill of Himring stays above water, as do the highest points around Dorthonion, now known as Tol Fuin. The Sea of Helcar has completely drained, although, as I said earlier, we're not sure whether this process happened earlier, and Melkor's Iron Mountains have been destroyed. Though, I will point out that we're also not sure if the Northern Grey Mountains and the Iron Mountains were part of the same mountain chain. Turns out we're not really sure about a lot of things. You'll see that the Westlands of Middle-earth are mostly the exact same as what we see in the Third Age, mostly because there are some changes, but I'll get to that soon. One thing you might notice is that Numenor is actually quite far south, and I didn't talk about this before, but Tol-Eressëa and the important parts of Valinor are actually at the equator, so shouldn't they be tropical and really hot? Well, no, not necessarily, because the world is flat at this point. The sun doesn't interact with the world in the same way as our sun interacts with our world. You might say, well, surely it does, because the north is very cold. Well, yes, but that was due to Melkor's influence. Why is Harad really hot and desert-like then? Well, regional climate is different from global climate. Deserts can exist in cold locations much like they can exist in hot locations. Anyway, I'm not a geophysicist, and I'm not sure if the stuff I just spoke about is actually in the field of geophysics, but I thought I should try and clarify certain things anyway, so... Moving on, we get mention of Numenor conquering and colonizing some of the vast coastlines of Middle-earth, and this map allows us to visualize that, the vast amount of territory Numenor could explore. It also shows just how close Numenor was to Valinor, which is why elves regularly visited Numenor until Numenor started to become evil. Likewise, it also shows why Numenorians didn't return to Middle-earth until around 600 of the Second Age. Middle-earth was pretty far away. So here's our final semi-accurate map of Middle-earth in the Third Age. Notable differences: the world is now round thanks to the Numenorians being idiots. Valinor has been removed from the circles of the world, replaced by new lands of which we have no idea what they possibly look like. So you could technically add an island shaped like a penis, and it would be no more incorrect than what you see on this map. Considering the state of Middle-earth in the Third Age, it is highly unlikely that these new lands have been explored. Other differences are that more coastliners went underwater, especially in Gondor as well as a little bit north in Lindon. Of course, it's anyone's guess as to what geographical features the vast lands of the east and south of Middle-earth contained. All that is known is that in these lands lived men, plenty of whom were either enslaved or in service to Sauron. Not much of a difference, I feel, that's kind of the same thing. It also shows how large the dominions of the Black Númenóreans might have been, and most importantly, it shows that Gondor, even at the height of its power, was still quite small compared to the rest of Middle-earth. There's also dwarves in Oricani, and there might even be some Avari, the Dark Elves, still floating around. So what happens next? Well, who knows? Tolkien envisioned Arda as being a mythical version of our own Earth, so following Tolkien's mythos, the continents shift again until eventually everything becomes like our own Earth. That's a lot of geological shifting, and considering Tolkien said that our own Earth is likely in the late 6th or 7th age, and that the ages have gotten smaller, something cataclysmic must have happened to completely reshape the world. Maybe they got screwed by their own version of climate change, maybe Bomber got launched into space and returned as an asteroid. Who knows? Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it interesting. Maps are awesome, shame there aren't more of them. But it leaves a lot to our own imagination, such as what's in those fan-made maps. Some of them are quite good, so check them out. Some of them are also quite bad. I won't mention which ones because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Anyway, thanks again, and cheers. Remember, at the end of every age, it might be a good idea to move away from the coasts.